What would you grab if you had 24 hours before the sun disappeared forever? Food? Weapons? Fuel. The brutal truth is that none of the typical survival supplies would extend your life significantly in this scenario. In the next 15 minutes, we'll show you the exact timeline of Earth without the sun, revealing why 99.9% of survival strategies would fail within months. Then we'll take you inside the 3 locations where small groups might survive for years, and the impossible choices they'd face as Earth's final humans. Have you ever wondered what would actually happen in the first 3 days after the sun vanishes? Most people imagine immediate darkness, but the reality is far more terrifying. Let's explore this cosmic nightmare step by step. When the sun disappears, we wouldn't know it immediately. For exactly 8 minutes and 20 seconds, life on Earth continues as normal. Why? Because that's how long it takes light to travel the 93 million miles from the sun to our planet. Those final photons are still racing toward us through the vacuum of space, carrying the last warmth we'll ever receive from our star. Then it happens, sudden. Complete darkness everywhere on the daylight side of Earth. Not like an eclipse or sunset, but something profoundly unnatural. The psychological impact would be immediate and devastating. Imagine the most fundamental constant in human existence, the daily rising and setting of the sun, simply gone. This isn't just panic. It's a complete psychological fracture as our brains struggle to process something that defies our evolutionary programming. Within the first hour, power systems worldwide begin failing spectacularly. Those solar farms that provide clean energy, instantly useless. But that's just the beginning. As temperatures start dropping at alarming rates, heating demands spike beyond anything our grids were designed to handle. Blackouts cascade across continents as systems overload and fail. Your phone might work for a while, but who would you call? Communication networks would quickly become overwhelmed, then collapse as backup generators run dry. By the end of the first day, temperatures worldwide have plummeted by about 10 degrees. The tropics now feel like autumn in temperate zones. Canada and Russia are already experiencing deadly cold. And remember, this is just the first day. The plant world enters crisis immediately. Without sunlight, photosynthesis, the process that powers nearly all life on Earth, stops instantly. Those beautiful houseplants? They begin dying within days. Crops? Writing off this year's harvest would be the least of our worries. Interestingly, large trees might survive for decades, thanks to their slow metabolism and stored energy, becoming silent monuments to the green world that once was. As we cross the 48-hour threshold, temperatures everywhere have fallen below freezing. Water pipes burst in homes across the world. Roads crack. Wildlife, desperate for warmth and food, invades human settlements en masse. The mass die-off has begun. By hour 72, our atmosphere itself begins transforming. Without the sun's energy to drive our climate systems, weather patterns become increasingly chaotic. Winds die down in some areas while reaching destructive speeds in others as temperature differentials create pressure systems never before seen. The thermal engine that powers our familiar weather is sputtering and failing. Hollywood gets this all wrong. Post-apocalyptic movies show people fighting each other for resources while struggling heroically to survive. But the reality, those first 72 hours, wouldn't be about survival strategies or rebuilding civilization. They would be about witnessing our entire planet transform into something alien and hostile at terrifying speed, as the world above freezes into an alien landscape. Humanity's final refuge might not be found in underground bunkers, but in the dark embrace of the oceans. The math of underwater survival reveals a desperate equation, one that offers both a sliver of hope and a stark reality check about our species. Chances in a sunless world? Nuclear submarines, these massive metal tubes designed for war, could ironically become lifeboats for a small fraction of humanity. Their nuclear reactors represent a crucial advantage in our dying world: power. Generation that doesn't depend on the vanished sun. These reactors can operate for decades without refueling, providing the essential trinity of survival: electricity, heat, and the ability to manufacture breathable air. But here's where the brutal arithmetic begins. An Ohio-class nuclear submarine can sustain approximately 155 people, but this assumes perfect resource management and strict rationing from day one. These vessels were never designed as permanent habitats. Their food storage systems, while impressive by military standards, only hold about 6 months of supplies. What happens on day 181 becomes the first existential crisis for the submarine survivors. Think about the psychological reality of this existence. You're sealed in a metal tube with 154 other people, knowing that the world above has frozen solid. There's no natural light, no fresh air, and every calorie of food must be meticulously accounted for. Studies of submarine crews show significant psychological strain during normal deployments. Now imagine that stress multiplied by the knowledge that you're among the last humans alive, with no relief ever coming. As surface waters freeze solid, the deep ocean presents a paradox. It remains liquid for hundreds of thousands of years. The ice layer above acts as insulation, while geothermal heat from Earth's core keeps the depths from freezing. This creates another potential sanctuary. Deep-sea research stations, positioned near hydrothermal vents. These underwater oases offer something submarines cannot, a renewable energy source. The geothermal energy from these vents could provide heat and power indefinitely, solving one piece of the survival puzzle. But the food problem remains equally challenging here. Without the sun-powered food chain that once fed humanity, survivors would need to venture into the blackened oceans to harvest creatures that don't depend on photosynthesis. Near hydrothermal vents, entire ecosystems thrive through chemosynthesis rather than photosynthesis. These strange biological communities, tube worms, specialized bacteria, and unique crustaceans, could potentially become humanity's final food source. But harvesting them sustainably while maintaining a human population would require delicate ecological management in the most hostile environment imaginable. The harshest truth is purely mathematical. Even if we maximize every nuclear submarine and deep-sea station on Earth, the total carrying capacity represents just 0.01% of humanity. That's not even considering the impossible logistics of getting people to these underwater sanctuaries as the world above rapidly deteriorates. For those few thousand survivors, the psychological burden would be crushing, living in cramped quarters with dwindling supplies, no natural light, and the knowledge that you're witnessing the end of human civilization would push mental health to breaking points. Every resource decision becomes both a practical and ethical dilemma. Who eats when food runs low? Who gets medical treatment when supplies dwindle? How do you maintain social order when everyone knows there's no future beyond your metal walls? While underwater sanctuaries might offer temporary refuge for a select few, one small volcanic island in the North Atlantic could become humanity's last true civilization. Iceland, with its otherworldly landscapes of fire and ice, possesses something truly remarkable in our sunless scenario. A heat source that doesn't depend on our vanished star. Let's talk about Iceland's geothermal advantage. This island nation sits atop one of Earth's most active volcanic regions, where magma flows close to the surface, providing nearly limitless heat. It's not a theoretical resource either. Icelandic society already harnesses this energy extensively. With 87% of homes heated through geothermal sources, they've effectively been preparing for a sunless scenario without even realizing it. The initial calculations paint a surprising picture of hope. Energy experts suggest Iceland's geothermal capacity could potentially sustain between 50,000 to 100,000 people. A fraction of humanity, yes, but a legitimate civilization could persist here while the rest of Earth freezes solid. But this mathematical possibility comes with a brutal qualifier. Survival would depend on immediate, ruthless decisions about resource allocation. Think about the Icelandic survival equation. You have three critical variables: heat, abundant through geothermal vents; food, severely constrained without sunlight; and psychological stability, deteriorating with each passing day. The heat problem is solved, but that only addresses one dimension of survival. Food production becomes the critical bottleneck. Underground farming using artificial light powered by geothermal energy presents a theoretical solution. However, the energy calculations reveal a devastating reality. The power required to grow enough food for even a small population would be enormous. Each plant requires specific light spectrums, temperature control, water circulation, and nutrient delivery systems. The mathematics of calories versus available energy creates impossible ethical dilemmas. Who gets to eat when harvests fall short? Who receives warmth when heating systems must be rationed? And perhaps most disturbing, who gets to reproduce when each new child represents another permanent drain on finite resources? These aren't hypothetical questions but daily realities in this frozen world. Food production becomes the critical bottleneck. Underground farming using artificial light powered by geothermal energy presents a theoretical solution. However, the energy calculations reveal a devastating reality. The power required to grow. Enough food for even a small population would be enormous. Each plant requires specific light spectrums, temperature control, water circulation, and nutrient delivery systems. The mathematics of calories versus available energy creates impossible ethical dilemmas. Who gets to eat when harvests fall short? Who receives warmth when heating systems must be rationed? And perhaps most disturbing, who gets to reproduce when each new child represents another permanent drain on finite resources? These aren't hypothetical questions but daily realities in this frozen world. As Earth's crust continues cooling, the viability of geothermal energy would gradually diminish. Survivors would be forced to abandon outlying settlements and cluster around the most productive volcanic vents, creating increasingly dense underground communities. What begins as a distributed network of shelters would inevitably contract into crowded, subterranean habitats as thermal efficiency becomes paramount. The psychological toll would compound over time. Imagine living in perpetual darkness, in increasingly cramped quarters, knowing you're among the last humans alive. Studies of closed-system agricultural experiments show that while some crops can be grown with artificial light, the severe space limitations in energy constraints create an environment of constant scarcity. Every resource decision becomes both a practical and moral calculation. We've explored the ingenious ways humanity might briefly extend its existence following the sun's disappearance. But let's face it, our planet would ultimately become nothing more than a frozen tomb, hurtling through the cosmic void at 67,000 miles per hour. This isn't just another apocalypse scenario. It's a mathematical certainty that strips away our technological illusions. Think about it. Despite our smartphones, our nuclear submarines, and our geothermal plants, we remain utterly dependent on a massive ball of burning, guess 93 million miles away. The psychological weight on those final human survivors would be unbearable, not just from the physical hardships, but from bearing witness to Earth's transformation. Imagine being among the last humans, carrying the philosophical burden of knowing you're watching the final chapter of a 4 billion-year story of life, while contemplating your own existence in a universe that will continue without you. These final observers wouldn't just face their own mortality, but would experience something uniquely terrible, watching their once vibrant world become simply another lifeless rock drifting through the endless darkness of space.